DLC, or downloadable content, has been a staple in games ever since Bethesda thought horse armor was worth $2.50. Cosmetics aside, DLC is usually made to extend the life of the base game without having to create an entirely new one. On top of that, it allows developers to expand upon characters or other parts of the game's world. Some DLC can even change the way players view the entire game. While I'm not much of an avid DLC enjoyer myself, there is one game's DLC that made me appreciate the base game even more than I already did. But it did take some time for me to get there. In fact, let me take you back to the year 2021, when a friend of mine told me that this small indie horror game just got a sequel, and already it had become one of his favorite games ever. That game was Little Nightmares 2. Hearing all that praise, I was like, damn! Still gotta get Diamond 4 in Rocket League though. So initially, I decided to pass on it. That was until the prophesized day, when Little Nightmares was given away. Yeah, I know I'm cheap, but I didn't let it sit in my backlog. For once, I actually played it. And then immediately played the second one right after. Both of these games were just chef's kiss, with their atmosphere, mystery, characters, and endings being so incredibly memorable. However, in between 1 and 2, the developers, Tarsier Studios, cooked up a DLC called Secrets of the Maw, which I completely ignored. Yeah, I know, fake fan, plus I fell off, plus I'm bald. Or am I? You'll never know. But one thing I didn't realize was that back in 2017, each chapter was initially released in 3-month increments, which I did criticize Little Nightmares 3 for doing. That being said, I don't have to wait. So on to Little Nightmares DLC, Secrets of the Maw. If you haven't played Little Nightmares, essentially the Maw is this giant tourist spot in the middle of the ocean, which houses these morbidly obese guests. Each of them visits to indulge to their heart's content. But deep within this ship lies a dark secret. I don't know if you noticed, but there aren't any children in that lineup. The reason being, they're the food. And so we follow one of those kids who ran away, aptly named the Runaway Kid. If you did play the first game, you'll recognize him as the one who passed the bread to a hungry Six, the previous protagonist. But after playing this DLC, you'll understand he's a bit more significant than you'd think. Since it's pretty short and divided into 3 chapters, I'll cover them in order, starting with the depths. The Maw is extremely complex, with so many moving parts that it's hard to know where it ends. Well, it turns out this is where it ends. The depths are sort of the bilge water area of the ship, where water can get flushed away or filled up with the press of a button. This forces you to swim or jump across floating objects to get to safety. Because lurking within these waters is a half-naked granny.
Just take your sweet time, old lady. I've got all day.
She's kind of like Jason from Friday the 13th, knocking you off your platform so she can drag you down with her. Or at least try to. While this wasn't the most polished area, the sound design and atmosphere created this palpable tension every time you swam. What? If I'm being honest, however, this chapter is easily the weakest of the 3, especially because half the time, the game refuses to work right. When I got to this TV part where I was supposed to push it off a ledge, it just wouldn't budge. Come on, go! Are you serious? After way too many attempts, I was successfully able to fry the granny. Now you're able to climb this ladder and finally escape. Well, almost escape. So because this game takes place during the events of the first one, the janitor is still on the loose, capturing and packaging the produce to be processed. But we won't be a part of that process. Through sheer luck and determination, we break free.
My back!
Now we enter the Hideaway, an area of the Maw that holds their means of production. But noticeably, we're now surrounded by gnomes. These little guys, not you, normally help guide the player where to go next. However, here, they're utilized much more. The first part of this chapter is all about finding and hugging the gnomes to gather them all to one place. Now I know what you're thinking, and no, we do not throw them in the furnace, as much as you might want to. In this game, they essentially act as co-op companions, kind of like what Six would become in the second game, except with the gnomes, you can use their numbers to push heavy objects and keep open doors. I really like this mechanic as it makes the gnomes actually useful for once. At least when they listen, that is. Wait, there's one missing. Sir, what are you doing? Get over here. But after gathering all the gnomes and adding fuel to the fire, it's time to sneak past the janitor. The method here is pretty much the same as the first game. Stay on the rugs and avoid anything that will make a sound. Oh my gosh. But if you're good enough, you can cheese him without crouching at all. Eventually, you escape the janitor's clutches and make it on top of an elevator, where the lady awaits. Essentially, the lady is in charge of making sure the maw runs as intended. However, when she's not manning, or I guess womaning, the ship, she's caring for her dolls in the residence. Compared to the previous 2 chapters, this one is quite puzzle heavy. To get further in, we have to collect these totems. First, it looked like it might go in a similar direction to that chess puzzle from 2, however, I actually like this better, as within this labyrinth, the lady has set up some booby traps which you have to solve Indiana Jones style. There's also the portrait puzzle, which was basically just I Spy. But it did bring back the all-seeing eye from the very first level, and foreshadowed new enemies. Well, mostly because for the last totem, you have to get past these shadow kids. Each of them have porcelain masks, hinting that the lady is puppeting them like her dolls. To handle these shadows, you have to aim your flashlight at them until they disappear, which with these keyboard and mouse controls is easier said than done. Wait, haven't I seen this before? Anyway, once that's done, you get the last totem and make your way to the lady's chambers. As you traverse through each room, there's not a single mirror that isn't broken. The reason for that... wood. Now the atmosphere is heavier, as there's no telling what the lady is capable of. If you played the first one, you know 6 kills the lady, so what does that mean for the runaway kid? Well, it turns out he can no longer run away, as the lady has transformed him into a gnome. This is a huge revelation because it was never explicitly shown what or who gnomes even are. This completely recontextualizes your interactions with them in each game. None more so than the sausage scene. Yep, as you stumble your way through the guest area, you end up exactly where 6 consumes a gnome, implying that the person who you initially gave your dinner to ends up having you for dinner. This scene on its own is still brutal, but adding this context makes it even more tragic. And that's all 3 chapters of Secrets of the Maw. This was exactly the kind of experience I was looking for after playing 3. Not only did it change the way I saw the first game, it also added fun and interesting mechanics that were unfortunately never used again. Still, you could definitely see how they use this as a testing ground for what they would implement in Little Nightmares 2. While I usually don't play DLC, this was a nice little trip down memory lane and made me appreciate the series even more. It'll be interesting to see if Little Nightmares 3's DLC will do the same. You already know I'm excited for Tarja's other project, Reanimal, which I did make a video for the demo, so be ready for that video on the full game come February-ish. That's it for me. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.